So, progressives once again have another milestone to celebrate. Now, when Bernie Sanders first announced, he absolutely crushed everyone in fundraising. I mean, to be honest with you, as long as I have been paying attention closely to politics, which has been at this point about 9 to 10 years that I've been paying attention this close, I've never seen anything like this. By the way, I'm only 30. But according to all the record books, y'all haven't seen anything like this either because Bernie broke all the records. And what was even more interesting is that, well, to be quite honest with you, up until this point, he's broken all of his own records. And all the establishment candidates have basically been trying to use these metrics to say that they are comparable, at least as far as their traction is concerned, to a Bernie Sanders, which simply isn't true. But it's also ironic because they said that things like individual donors and the dollar amounts that are donated, that doesn't mean anything. That doesn't mean you have legitimate support across the board until they thought Kamala was going to break the record and Bernie crushed her, until they thought Beto O'Rourke had the record. Turned out that was a lie. Until they thought that all these candidates were raising money through individuals only, and it turned out Kamala and Beto O'Rourke were raising money through bundlers and we're still using lobbyists. However, these lobbyists weren't federal lobbyists. Now, this is what I'm about to read to you is another huge milestone for the Sanders campaign and for the progressive movement in general, and I'll explain why in a second. So, according to Grit Post, Bernie Sanders' campaign has more money than the DNC, the DSC, and the DCCC. So the article says that Senator Bernie Sanders is currently leading the Democratic primary in money raised. And according to the campaign finance records, he has more money than the Democratic Party's leading campaign organizations. Reddit user Lone Star Mike 59 recently combed through filings from the Democratic National Committee, the Democratic Senatorial Campaign Committee, and then the DCCC, which many of you are familiar with, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the one that's currently having beef with all the progressives. All of which coordinate fundraising for candidates running for federal office in both the House and the Senate. Now, when factoring in total assets of all three organizations, including current debt on their respective balance sheets, Lone Star Mike 59 on Reddit found that all three organizations are still not as flush with cash as the lone Bernie Sanders 2020 campaign. Now, the math checks out on Lone Star's post because according to the DNC's first quarter filings with the Federal Elections Committee, the organization raised $9.3 million, or they have $9.3 million on hand as of March 31st, 2019. But there's a caveat, because it also has $6.5 million in outstanding debts and from loans that they owe. The DSCC, which is the Senate arm of the Democratic Party, is still deeply in the red with $19.1 million in outstanding debts, which probably explains why they can't win back the Senate. They don't have any money. I wonder why that is. How many progressives are in the Senate? Oh yeah, that's why they can't raise money. And they only owe $12.7 million. And they only have $12.7 million cash on hand. The DCCC, for its part, is the most financially stable of the three Democratic organizations, with $14.8 million in cash on hand and $6 million in debts and loans as of March 31st, 2019. Now, when factoring in the total cash on hand and subtracting all the debts and loans owed, those three campaign committees combined have just $5,164,948. To compare, FEC records for Senator Sanders' campaign shows that as of March 31st, 2019, the Vermont senator has $17,850,355 in cash on hand with no debt or loans. I repeat, $17 million, all raised by individuals, about a total of 260,000 individual donors with no debts and no loans. This means that the Sanders campaign for 2020 has more than 3 times the amount of money that the Democratic Party's 3 main campaign committees have combined. Wow. Talk about a movement. This is what a progressive movement look like. Even more interesting, the article goes on to say that most of the money donated to his campaign were from people younger than 29 years old. Uh-oh. And you're wondering why they're oversampling older people. Because they know that if they look at the younger people and if they poll the younger voters who, by and large, by the way, are not even part of the Democratic Party, a lot of us are independents. So just based off of that, they know that the likelihood of us voting for someone who isn't staunchly anti-establishment is zilch at this point because they haven't given us a reason to vote for them. Do you understand what this means, people? Joe Biden in his first 24 hours raised 96,000 donors. The money's kind of irrelevant at this point because he's going to burn through that cash. But he had 96,000 donors. Bernie Sanders had 250,000. You understand that? How, in any world, by any legitimate metric, can you even think about pretending as if Joe Biden is leading this race? How? Well, he has name recognition. You know what? I've heard that before. I don't know where I've heard these excuses in the past. I wish I could remember. Oh, that's right. That was right around the time that those same polls, these same pundits who had claimed that Hillary had a 99% chance of winning, and all of these metrics, these people-powered metrics meant nothing. Remember that? That's what they were telling you. Yeah, everybody has 13,000 people go to a rally with 3,000 in overflow. That's a normal thing in politics. It isn't. It wasn't. We told y'all. There is no way that Joe Biden should be leading. And I mean, in any poll, if it is legitimate, Joe Biden should not be leading, and yet here we are. Now, in my humble opinion, obviously, I believe, based on the facts, that most of the polling during the Democratic primary is very skewed. It's most of it's done by one or two groups, that CNN, MSNBC, et cetera, that they trust to poll and get the best results for the narrative that's prevailing at the time. I don't need polls when I can look at this. We saw something similar to this with Tulsi Gabbard, right? And one of the polls done by Emerson, which is usually a decently reliable poll, they tried to claim that Julian Castro was polling higher than Tulsi. Julian Castro hadn't even met the debate requirements as far as fundraising is concerned. He had 20,000 fewer individual donors than Tulsi did. And Klobuchar had even less. She qualified for the debates based off of polling. And yet, they were saying Klobuchar and Julian Castro were doing better than Tulsi, but the part that they often leave out is that margin of error. 5.2% margin of error, which is utterly ridiculous. These are the metrics that determine who is in the lead. And by any objective measure, it is clear Bernie Sanders is well on his way to being the Democratic nominee. He is. You know, you can say who your favorite is. You already know who my favorite is. But the facts are the facts. And what I can't stand is how because it's the same thing. Even with your favorite candidate, if you're progressive, so if your favorite candidate is Tulsi Gabbard, then you should be just as pissed, because even with literally every single metric in his favor, whether you want to talk about crowd turnout, the donors, the amount of donors, how much he's raised, volunteers, even with every single metric benefiting him, they're still trying to manufacture belief and prep us for the moment that a lot of people believe Bernie Sanders will be inevitably cheated. So if they can do that to the clear front runner, who is the most favored candidate in the country, imagine what they can do to your favorite candidate. Imagine what they'll do to somebody like Tulsi Gabbard, who is firmly and uncompromisingly anti-establishment. That is why we have to call this stuff out. It is important for people to recognize that these are the numbers that matter. That's partially why the Democratic Party they still do, but then they obviously have become more arbitrary. Well, after this first two debates, we'll see how things pan out. We might change the rules a little bit. So, of course, they would change the rules, because if we did things like, what is your average crowd turnout? What is your polling amongst independents? What is your polling in open primary states like North Carolina, like Minnesota, like Michigan, like things like that have either open or semi-open primaries? If they did legitimate metrics, then they won't get the result they want. It's easy to manufacture consent and manufacture results when you're only polling Democrats. And then on top of that, as we've seen, they're only polling like the quote unquote seasoned Democrats, the blue dog, blue no matter who, older generation of Democrats who aren't that much different than conservatives. They're conservatives who believe in equal rights for gay marriage. That's pretty much it. These numbers matter, people. $17 million. Almost triple what the entire Democratic Party has on hand. Now, for my final point, when at the beginning of this election, I said, when people ask me, well, how are things going to be different? Why do you believe that Sanders will break through, despite the fact that we know they'll cheat him? We do know one thing for a fact. Somebody's going to try to cheat Bernie. It's already started. However, somebody can try to cheat Bernie, but everybody ain't trying to cheat Bernie this time. Now, what do I mean by that? The truth of the matter is, the entire Democratic Party had gathered behind Hillary, and that didn't start in 2016. That started 7 to 8 years prior. Things are different now. They don't have a fundraising machine at their disposal like Hillary. Kamala keeps shooting herself in the foot every time she opens her mouth. Joe Biden is going to flail and flake out within the next 2 months. Elizabeth Warren isn't cutting it, right? Buttigieg is basically their only hope, but he's not even close to Bernie. Nor can he bring in independents the same way that a Bernie Sanders or a Tulsi Gabbard could. What does that mean? Well, a lot of people like having jobs more than they like playing establishment politics, to be completely honest with you. Not even joking. Why do you think that when Bernie went on the Fox News town hall prior to that, how many people insulted him and critiqued him? A lot. The Democratic candidates, I mean. But Tom Perez was like, nah, hey, go get him, Tiger. We may have our differences, but we got to pay these bills. In other words, people's self-interests are now at stake. And you have to understand, some of these people aren't inherently bad or altruistically good. They will do whatever it takes to keep their bank accounts filled. Now, in a lot of cases, that will work against the interests of the progressive movement. But in cases such as these, when they need money and the only person who can bring it in at this very moment is Bernie Sanders, then it works to our benefit, because that trickles down to how other candidates around the country are going to be fundraising, progressives, when the next midterms come, or when the next election comes, I should say, which is imminent. So these congressional candidates are going to benefit a lot from what Bernie Sanders is getting and the people that he uplifts. And, progressive media will benefit as well, where we can give attention to other candidates. I mean, this is what I mean by some people are going to try, inevitably. But do you see the mini war that is going on within the establishment itself? It's because they're fractured. They are fractured. Meanwhile, the only two progressives in the race, Bernie Sanders and Tulsi Gabbard, 95% of their followers or their supporters love each other. And they love the other candidate. And they have no problem if either of those candidates win. And they have no problem fundraising for both of those candidates. And all of the candidates and people they support. So when you can raise the money, it's kind of hard when you don't to say, we gotta cheat this man, we can't let him be president. It's hard to say that when you need a job, you need to win back the House again, and you need to win back the Senate. And the two fundraising arms to make sure that happen are broke as a really, really, really bad joke. That's basically what the Democratic Party has become. If I'm lying, I'm dying. It's hard to cheat somebody that you need. A lot of people did not like Hillary Clinton personally, as we saw in a lot of these emails, as we saw with the Colin Powell emails. Those are some funny emails. Yeah, I said it. I'll say it again. That's basically what Colin Powell said. But they don't like her. But they needed her because she had fundraising mechanisms in place that no one else had. She could raise money that no one else could. But that's not the case anymore. So now the establishment has become more fractured. And Bernie Sanders and the progressive movement are about to start seeing the benefits of that. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. Remember, more than anything else, people, find your balance. Peace. Thanks for watching that segment of Mika Says Sukasa. Don't forget to join us on Roku and catch our Roku exclusives. Also, help us reach our goal of 500 patrons on Patreon. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and JustNForm.com. But more than anything else, always remember, find your balance. Peace.